So we're going to begin the panel with our principals, and I think you'll immediately learn why these two leaders are here. They have each been honored by prestigious bodies as the very best at their work in New York City. Meg Adams is the principal of Lab Middle School in New York, and in 2012 she won the Blackboard Media Award as the best principal in the entire city. I first met Meg and Sal just after the results of New York's first Common Core tests were released. As you may recall, they were devastating. In Rochester, for example, only 5% of the students even managed to score a 1 to 4, barely passing. And in some schools in Buffalo, no student passed. But instead of wringing my hands and lamenting, I thought it made sense to find schools that by their own measures had succeeded. Let's look at places that have done well. At Lab Middle, 40% of the students saw their scores improve over the tests they had taken the previous year. Dr. Sal Fernández is principal of IS 52, I got that wrong earlier, in Upper Manhattan. He is the 2013 recipient of the Elizabeth Royden Prize for Advancing Teacher Excellence. As he will tell you, he established his own measures for success in a school that features a 92% Hispanic and 1/3 ELL population, and then met his own measures. And if Sal promises not to listen, I'll tell you a secret about him. I know he intends to devote the next phase of his career to helping schools with the Common Core, and I hope in that capacity that we can bring him back. So here we have two principals in two very different public middle schools, each selected by experts as the best in their field, ready to share ideas with you. And I've asked Meg to go first because her presentation is a little more informal, and then Sal, who has a couple of YouTubes to share along with his presentation. So, Meg.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Meg. I'm the principal of Lab Middle School for Collaborative Studies. Just a quick little bit about my school. It's a 6th through 8th grade, 600 children. We're not a neighborhood school, so we draw all around all of Lower Manhattan. And one of our key sort of values is collaboration. And our expectation with collaboration is it happens both among our children. We do view it as an explicit skill that we teach into over the course of the 3 years. But the collaborative expectation is also something that is really anchored and rooted in the ways of working among our faculty and our leadership team as well. So a lot of our work around the Common Core over the years really is rooted in this value of collaboration. I came into Lab 7 years ago as a school leader and found a school that had been very much resting on its laurels and reputation, but had not necessarily lived up to that over the years. And so viewing the school as an organic sort of institution and a work in progress, one of the things that I was really focused on was thinking about how we could keep improving and really serving the needs of our population. And that sort of question came in conjunction with this knowledge that there was going to be a revolution in what we were teaching our children with the Common Core learning standards. And so I felt very lucky to be a new principal at that moment, knowing that a few years later, this amazing thing was going to be coming down toward us. And I want to emphasize that I think that Common Core learning standards are excellent and are this incredible opportunity to really think about raising the standard of education for all of our children. Having taught elsewhere in other states and other parts of the country and knowing the disparity that exists within that and saying to our country that we should have a higher standard for all of our children is a really exciting sort of moment. And I name that in the context of all of this because it is really challenging, it is really hard, but it's also this really amazing blessing and opportunity that we all have. And I hope that you all can really embrace and understand that. And that's part of my perspective in this work. So, as I noted, one of our key values is collaboration. And another one of our values was academic rigor. And so when I came into Lab Middle School, I really realized that in no way were we holding our children to this rigorous expectation. My school is a screened school, so we do have an academic component to that, and our children were not being challenged in the way that we should expect them to be. So our sort of process of thinking about the Common Core Learning Standards really started there, and thinking about what is excellence, how do we define rigor, why is rigor one of our values, and that conversation started about 5 years ago. And so we started that conversation by reading this amazing book by Ron Berger called An Ethic of Excellence. And some of the packets are out on folks' tables. So there's a very short excerpt in that book. Ron Berger is a teacher, and he now travels the country talking about this idea of excellence and how to teach into that with our children. So we spent a whole entire year reading that text and really understanding what Ron Berger was saying about his own personal classrooms and how to instill this excellence in our children. And that's where we really started talking about this idea of rigor. And what came out of that was that we didn't like the word rigor. Right? And so we didn't like it. There is no point of challenging just for challenge's sake. It's really how children tackle tasks, think about their challenges, and grow from it and learn from it. And so we changed this value of academic rigor and this very sort of very superficial definition of just having really hard work to this value of academic tenacity. How we are tenacious in the work that we do, in our struggles, how we work through our struggles and learn from them. And there's a lot of other research around that, around instilling grit in children. But I start there in the conversation around the Common Core because it was this really excellent opportunity to reflect on our curriculum, to think about what we're doing well, and how we were not challenging our children. And you'll find with the Common Core Learning Standards that they are, using the bad term, more rigorous. And so it was this really excellent opportunity to have something from the outside coming in, knowing it's coming, but also reflect on an area on the inside that was a really big challenge. So that's where we started. We started by really thinking about how to instill excellence in our school and how to really have our children tackle challenge and push themselves forward. So in the process of the Common Core implementation, there were sort of two guiding assumptions that I started with. One was this idea that our school in no way was pushing our children the way they needed to be pushed. So this idea of academic tenacity, building this understanding of excellence. The other assumption was around who should be at the table to really help this implementation happen. And again, one of our values being collaboration. We're a highly collaborative school. And so my expectation was that we are all at the table to really help this implementation happen. Folks in the classroom, my librarian, who is a godsend in my school, they were central to having all of these conversations around implementation. So as I talk about this sort of 5-year sort of journey and process that we had at Ladd Middle School, I really want you all to keep those two assumptions in mind. One, again, was that we as a school really needed to move our academic expectation for our children, and two, it had to be a collaborative and authentic process. And I think that's a really important sort of thing to think about. I will also say, just for a little bit of context, in New York City, as principals, we're really blessed because we do have a very large amount of autonomy. So all of the decisions that we make, beyond the fact that we're adopting these standards, are really happening at the level of the school. And I'm sure Sal will say the same thing. The curriculum is very much developed within the school, and I think that's a really important aspect to the work. So again, 5 years ago, we started by just talking about what academic tenacity looked like, reading the text, really building that understanding with our faculty, and then reflecting on what we're doing with our students, and really having those sort of hard, difficult conversations around projects that our kids had done for years, and recognizing what they were actually getting out of it, what they were mastering, what they were being held accountable for, and what they weren't learning as well, where the gaps were. About 4 years ago was when we started seeing these draft standards come out. And that's the point where, as a principal, I fully empowered my teachers to become experts. And this is a messy process. So I do have to say that the length of time of engagement around what these standards in math and English language arts initially, were, what they meant, what they looked like, took years. Took years for my teachers to even build a level of expertise around. And I, as a principal, had to take a breath and say, this is an important investment of time. This is a messy process. We're all going through this together. And my expectation was that my teachers would become experts in this work. So it started by going to a lot of free professional developments. We don't have sort of the budget resource for anything else at our school right now, and a lot of sort of networking with other middle schools and other elementary schools who were engaging in the same work to really start to understand what the Common Core standards were for our school. And then from there, we actually had to rewrite our curriculum and really think about what are values to our school that still need to exist, what are important aspects of content that we want to make sure to retain, but also how are these new learning standards going to push our school forward? What do these new learning standards mean? And the city, New York City, had set over the past few years different levels of expectation around this implementation. So last year, the expectation was that schools would implement a number of tasks or Common Core anchored projects in all content areas. And so we really went in with that sort of plan into 2 summers ago. And in the middle of the summer, I'm sure you'll remember this too, in very small print, it told all the principals that, oh, the state test last year is going to have the Common Core test. It's not going to be the old standards, it's going to be the new standards. But don't worry, you still don't need to teach all the standards until this current year. At that point, we realized our children are being assessed on these new standards. We need to up our game. We need to move forward the calendar. So we did a full implementation of our Common Core learning standards last year. So we're now currently in our 2nd year of working with these new standards in humanities and in math, and using the literacy standards in our other subjects as well. And I name that just because I do think that's part of the reason that we fared so well on the state test, is because our children very much were working under these new standards. And I also name it to talk about where we are currently, and that's the majority of what sort of the resource packet's about. So we are currently in our 2nd year of these new Common Core learning standards, and again, coming from the premise of our school being a work in progress, this whole year is around reflection and refinement. So we've now implemented these standards, and we're able to really look and see how our kids are understanding the material, are going through the process, the projects, the tasks, and what they're mastering and what the gaps are. And this whole year has been around looking at student work and having those sort of reflective conversations. And I think that's really important as well, to recognize that in many ways it's a moving target. So as we become smarter and better at the work, as we understand more about the work, we have to continually reflect and refine our work to really meet the needs of our students. So one of the things that I included in the grade packet was just a really simple protocol that we use around looking at student work. And it's a really important aspect to our school. We've been doing that for a long time, looking at student data, but we hadn't been doing it in the context of this idea around sort of academic tenacity and thinking about how the Common Core has really upped the level of expectations academically for our students. And so that's something that we do use a protocol around. All of our faculty is engaged and involved in that. And it really is helping us now in year 2 of this full implementation process think about where we are with our curriculum and where we need to go. The other thing that we decided to do for this year is really invest fully in this instructional goal of reflective practice. And so that's actually the first page. It kind of just gives the theory that we're working under, where we have an experience, we reflect on the experience, and then we learn from it and go back to the cycle. And so the whole sort of year is our entire faculty taking the process and the experience of all these moments of implementation, reflecting, learning, and then refining our practice and our process. And again, coming back to this sort of central assumption that the work is really anchored at the level of instruction with our librarian and our classroom teachers. It really puts them central in this entire sort of process that we're doing. One of the things that we changed for this year was the way in which we do professional development as well. So we do have the fortune of having a lot of city-based community partners for our content sort of professional development. So our math teachers do have those relationships and go off-site for that professional development. But here at the school level, over the years, our budget has shrunk so much that we don't have any money for professional development within our school. And so we've thought a lot around how to really both access resources internally, so among our staff, and also how to personalize and really make specific professional development for each teacher. So this year what we did is we've used the model of professional learning communities, which we've used in the past, but we decided that all professional learning communities are doing the same thing. They're focusing on these standards, they're reflecting on these standards, but they're doing it in different ways. And so we had folks think about how they learn best, how they think best, and then from there choose a professional learning community that is structured in the way that they learn and think and operate best. And that's just on the second page. So there are 4 different sorts of structures that folks could choose from, again, all anchored in this idea of reflection around the Common Core. So folks who like to journal and process through writing and talk about their experiences would be in the journaling group. And folks that like to get into other people's classrooms and see practice in action and talk about that are in the intervisitation group. And then folks who really like to do much more of the concrete planning and analysis of writing of tasks and planning are in the lesson planning group. And then the last group is the looking at student data. And they're the ones that on an ongoing basis are analyzing student data across the school, looking at student work. Again, this focus around the Common Core implementation. And I found, and I share this just because I found, again, when we're trying to really authentically empower folks, we need to make sure that our professional development structures are ones that lend to that sort of authentic investment. Recognizing I have a staff of 40 teachers, that just like our children, adults learn differently and engage differently. Like I might have a bias to be in the intervisitation group, whereas one of my math teachers really likes to look at the student work. And so because of that, rather than differing the content of the learning communities, we differ the structure by which they learn and reflect. And we have found that that has had tremendous success this year because it was a non-negotiable that everybody was going to talk about this curriculum. The way in which they could talk about it and engage about it had to be different based on who they were. And so the first year we did that, where we kind of flipped this idea of PLCs on their head and changed the structure of them versus the content. And it's been really quite fruitful for us in really trying to forward the entire school community with this idea of reflective practice. The one other thing that I just wanted to make note of in the packet, which I found to be an invaluable resource in having this conversation around rigor and academic tenacity, are these sort of cognitive matrix. And they're online, but I made copies of them. And they take what I remember learning in ed school with the Bloom's taxonomy, and they combine it with this depth of knowledge to really help teachers start to think about how they're designing assessment, both formative and summative assessment in their classes, to really think about how they're furthering the learning of their students. And again, this comes back to the difference between rigor for rigor's sake, or like just making something hard and challenging because that's what you should do, and actually having children think at a much deeper level and push themselves to be engaged in their learning. And that's really the whole purpose, in my viewpoint, of the Common Core learning standards, is how are we really holding expectation for our children as learners, and how are we changing that in our classrooms. And that's the last thing I want to note. New York City is at this very interesting sort of time where not only are we implementing this massive change to our curriculum, but we're also holding teachers accountable in a very different way. In New York City, we're using the Danielson framework for teaching, and we've also spent all year engaging and understanding that. But there's an interesting sort of tie-in between these two mandates, and that is that classrooms are changing, and the way that we teach children is changing. And that expectation is held both through teacher practice, through these frameworks that you all are engaging in as well, and through the curriculum itself. And so that's the last thing I want to say about this, is that my teachers have found that it's not just that we have to change the order in which we teach 6th grade math or add extra text to the science curriculum. It's that the questions we ask, the role of the learner in the classroom is changing drastically in our education system. And again, I think for the better. The last thing I'll just point out from the packet is just some resources on the last page. Definitely in your spare time, you should check out some of these resources, because I do think that there's a larger sort of conversation on how schools implement this beyond just the curriculum itself, and some of the resources sort of point to that sort of collaborative spirit and aspect. And then the other one that is just like my most favorite resource ever that I just want to highlight is an internet resource around different critical friends protocols. So not only do we look at student work, but we do a lot of different protocols at our school to help us engage in how we move our organization forward. So the National School Reform faculty has an amazing resource, all of it's free and online, with hundreds of protocols, both really rooting and looking at student work, but looking at dilemma, building teams, all these different things that I've used with my faculty, my school teacher leaders have used with their teams, and my teachers have also used with their children. So I just want to highlight that as an amazing resource that we use on a daily basis within our school to really move this sort of collaborative implementation forward.
So thank you, Meg. I think you guys got a lot to begin with and to chew on. And Sal.
Wow, where do I go from here? Meg, that was awesome. So I heard a couple of things. Collaboration is key in order to implement the Common Core. And I also heard that we have, this year in New York City, we have the teacher evaluation system that has been attached to student performance and Common Core. So we're learning three things, right? Common Core, teacher effectiveness, which is Danielson, and now that all deals with student performance, that the Common Core is supposed to start 2014-15, fully implemented in kindergarten. And we're middle school students, we're middle school people, and they haven't gone to any Common Core before us type of teaching. So we have our work cut out. But I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my school. We're in the northern tip of Manhattan. 98% of our students are Hispanic. 32% are English language learners, and 15% of them are special needs. And as Marc said, and I want to thank Marc for inviting us here. I think I met you back in June or May.
Something like that.
And he says 2014 February we'll be having a panel. Oh yeah, no problem. And it's here. I can't believe this. And I'm a little nervous right now, so I try to make jokes. And I'll keep myself focused. I have a whole thing written which I'm going to read to you because I'm really passionate about this work. 15% of our kids have special needs. So one of the things that administrators need to do and teachers, you need to know your students. My school is different than Meg's school, but we know each other's students. So she knows her students, I know my students, my teachers know my students, they know their students, and they can plan accordingly, right? So we've been doing the Common Core work since 2009 when all these Common Core rubrics were dropped. We were part of the General Electric Foundation. General Electric Foundation invests $300 million a year in 7 districts, and they do believe in improving teaching practices across the 7 districts in the United States of America. And that we could find those districts out later. So The best explanation that I've ever heard on the Common Core comes from Kelly Wells, the director of the U.S. Education from the General Electric Foundation. She summed it up pretty nicely by saying, the Common Core state standards are about providing students an opportunity to master skills to be successful in a global economy. Instead of trying to teach 80 different concepts in a given year, it is about focusing on 30 different concepts, mastering those concepts, and moving on. Learning how to be critical thinkers, learning how to analyze text, learning how to take the text, summarize it, synthesize it, and come back to engage in dialogue, in conversation. It is not about just having students take an ACE test. It's about having students that can work together, collaborate, think together, and share and reflect. And I think Meg mentioned that in her speech, that she's doing that with her teachers. So before we get our students to do that, we need to teach our teachers and librarians, since this is a school library and a school communication, and teachers to really become reflective practitioners. So I thought that was an awesome definition. And now what we do in our school, we believe, we also have, we believe in communication. We have the 3 C's: communications, collaboration, and consistency. So the first one, communication, is very important. And how we could communicate transparently to our teachers, our parents, our staff of all, and our students is key. So through the Common Core standards, this is easy because it clearly defines the educational journey of students from kindergarten through 12th grade. It's laid out for you. The roadmap is there. So all we need to know is understand these Common Core standards. So the next thing is collaboration. So we took the liberty of providing you with a 3-minute video, and they're all 3-minute videos, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. But the first one you'll see is about our common planning units. We provide our teachers with 180 minutes a week of planning time, 2 90-minute blocks. One for teacher teams, and what they do there is basically they look at the units of study that we have developed that are all aligned to the Common Core literacy and numeracy standards, and they use that to common plan, tweak the units as the need for that student population for that particular year, and tailor their lessons to meet the needs of those particular learners. The next 90 minutes is more inquiry work. They look at student work. We have a protocol to look at student work as well, and they see, is the work that the student's doing meeting that particular standards that they're trying to address. So there's a lot of dialogue going there, but there's 180 minutes that I got to carve out throughout the day. So as administrators and teachers need this time to plan. You know, we compare ourselves to other countries, but in other countries, they do provide teachers with a lot of planning time. The other thing is, you'll see the video on collaboration in a little bit. The other thing that we do is we hold 3 sets of meetings with the teachers individually throughout the year. And we've been doing this now for 7 years in our school.
This journey started about 7 years ago when Dr. Fernández came to the school and put structures in place to facilitate student learning and also collaboration amongst teachers. What we really wanted to do was give teachers time to plan. TT is important because it gives the teacher an opportunity, a vehicle to discuss their concerns and how they could go about providing the necessary resources to provide an education to the population that we served. So it basically allows teachers to have conversations about best practices, obstacles, and resources. I think that it all starts with instruction in the class. I think that the curriculum, the way it's set up, is really challenging most of the students. It's providing multiple entry points for different students, but it's basically really engaging the students in learning.
I have been a 52 for many years, and what has changed is that we have the infrastructure in place for the teachers to be able to meet and plan units embedded in the Common Core. Now our teachers are meeting to discuss students' work, student progress. Teachers are meeting to develop their own units. And as the years progress, we have been able to modify, refine the units, but the teachers are the ones who are actually taking the lead in the curriculum development, but of course with a lot of support.
Started trying to think of a way that how can we work together and maybe I can learn something from this experience. And also, not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of the kids, being able to make some cross-curricular connections between her subject, which is ELA, and my subject, which is social studies.
So normally cross-curricular units are based on a theme, but this time we chose the topic of child labor, which is really a high interest topic. And while I focused on the skills needed to build this, Mr. DeJoseph provided the historical perspective on the entire issue. Both of us worked on certain skills like determining the central ideas of a text, using text evidence. This way the kids realized that it's not fragmented and it could help them write their essay better if they knew how the whole process began.
This was definitely empowering for me as a teacher because now I'm reshaping curriculum by working with you.
And we realized that when you design it yourself, there's a ownership here. And we invest a lot of time and energy, and the passion comes through to the students when we teach the topic.
We could have found some sort of cross-curricular task that somebody else had developed, I'm sure, if we had looked, but it wouldn't necessarily be right for our student population. It wouldn't play to their strengths or address their weaknesses, and it wouldn't have allowed us that opportunity to collaborate.
Collaboration is key, and also developing trust between administration and the teachers, parents, and students is also key. So one of the things that I started saying that we do is this data meetings. We do it 3 times a year. The first meeting is basically about going over the formative and summative results, the assessments that we have for the children. The summative are all the standardized tests, and we already know about that. That's a year-old data. What we really care to go over with the teacher are those diagnostics that they're providing the children in September. And we start these data meetings in October when they really get to understand their students. And one of the things that we're asking them this year to do is find out what standards from the lower grade that they came from did the students master and did not master. And and then they come and they set a goal. And we set a goal together and we discuss this. We discuss it in common planning and inquiry teams. Then around yesterday, we finished the second set of data meetings with the teachers, and we have about 40 teachers as well. And what we do there is to check to see if they're on track of meeting their standards. And we use those meetings also to inform us what type of support. We already have an idea, and we've been providing those supports to the teachers throughout the year. But there we get a sense, we get a deeper sense, and it's a check and balance for us that we're on the right track, providing the right supports to the teachers, because the teachers come and let us know then. So that's important. And then the last set of data meetings is, how did you think you did throughout the year? And the teachers are pretty honest about themselves, whether or not they met their targets, and if they didn't meet their target. So one of our targets is that we would like 85% of the children in their class to master 80% of the work. And if the children do that, they're pretty much on track to be proficient or higher on the state test. Because of our population, we understand that we may not get that 85% of the kids mastering 80% of the work, but if we get them to master at least 60% of the work, that's a good closing the achievement gap data for us. And then we could build from that, from the 6th grade to the 7th grade to the 8th grade. So we need to manage this very logically, because we can't jump into this whole Common Core thing without us thinking carefully through what it is that we need to do to make our children successful beyond our school. And we also have data that shows that once our students leave us, 82% of them are meeting the high school graduation requirements within 4 years. So they're meeting all their ninth grade requirements. 82% of them are meeting all their ninth grade requirements, which is a good indicator that they're going to finish high school within 4 years. The next thing that we believe in, the next C is consistency. This is what happens in our system, that we get a lot of voices, we get a lot of flavors for the month, and I keep telling my teachers, we're not Baskin Robbins. We need to be consistent to what we know works for our population. And whatever comes from the outside, we need to really be reflective, understand it, and then the way we deliver it, we have to be in control of that. So consistency is key. We need to be consistent to provide teachers with planning time throughout the day. We also provide an additional 50 minutes a week that we voted in through our UFT contract, the union, the teachers contract, that instead of providing additional remediation to the students in the afternoon, we use that time to plan. And that time we're using now to plan vertically. Remember, we started this Common Core journey fully in January 2011. We've been on it, and every year now, we've gotten better. Our teachers are more sophisticated. Our students are writing better. But now, what we were missing, it was the connection vertically. We were missing this discussion that teachers needed to have with each other, like 8th grade teachers talking to the 7th grade teachers. Listen, guys, the kids are coming up, but they're missing these 2 or 3 standards that we really need for you to reinforce in order for them to be successful in our grade. And that's the discussion. We also provided a summary for the elementary schools that are our feeders to let them know what were the literacy standards that our children came in that were somewhat weak in, what were they strong in both ELA and math. And we provided that information to the superintendent, and she's providing that information non-threatening to the elementary school principal, because this is all connected, right? It's K through 12, K through 14, K through 16. You know, it's a whole learning journey. So also consistency in monitoring teachers' progress. Sometimes we start this great initiative that we're tracking, and January comes and school happens. And then we forget all about tracking, meeting with teachers, checking in with them, and we let school go by. And the last thing is that we have to be consistent in providing opportunity for teachers to grow their pedagogy through professional development, peer development, through interclass visitation. And I'm so happy you have an interclass visitation learning group, because that's one of the things that we've been working a lot in, and that develops a lot of trust. So one of the also things that we do is we invite as many people as possible to come to our school. Mark was there. You're all welcome to come at any time you want, because the more you come and see what we do, it helps us, because you give us feedback, and our teachers are always open to visitors. The next video that I would like to put on is the teaching. This is actual, there's only 2 more, and then we'll wrap it up. Teaching the Common Core.
Next video.
And I like for you to see the work other than me talking about it, because I'm very biased about my school. So I think my school is the best, but now I found her school is the best. And I think your school is the best as well.
While Amari's getting this ready, I have to tell you, when I visited Sal's school, one of the most wonderful expressions of the school spirit came when I went to visit their marching band. They have one of the only 2 marching bands in Manhattan, and they were playing marching band merengue. And so I asked the teacher, where did you come up with marching band merengue? He went to DR to study merengue, to learn how to get the music, to orchestrate it so his kids, and then Sal sent me, you can look at YouTubes of them performing, and it's just thrilling. It really is thrilling to see these kids doing merengue that their teacher went to Dominican Republic to study to bring. And
so this video is basically a pass-along that I have for teachers, and I would like to see teachers being more being open to collaboration A school is a learning community for students, parents, and teachers, so it is imperative that all stakeholders are open to collaboration, which in turn leads to higher quality education for our students.
Basically, the Common Core is, I would say it's almost like an educational movement in a way. It's a way of reconceptualizing how we educate our students to make them college and career ready. Its focus is on providing like rigorous, meaningful instruction to students across grade levels and across content areas.
Common Core is one of the requirements is that they learn how to write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. We had today a task which addressed that. This is a task about child labor where children are being introduced to the argument writing, which they will be dealing with in detail in grade 7. So we were looking first at one side of the argument. So we looked at information like viewing the documentary Stolen Childhoods, which is about child labor, and then we read articles about child labor in the US.
I saw the videos and it was talking about how children's childhoods were stolen, and then Mrs. Shock, she started like showing us how to put in details in our introduction and stuff like that, and then we started writing our introduction on paper.
Getting started with each paragraph, that was a major area. How do I make the connection from one transition from the introduction to introducing my evidence? How do I organize it and put it in a coherent sentence? They were struggling with that because once they get started, then they know how to go ahead. Yes, but you've got to fill in the blanks. You've got to decide which incident you want to use, which article number it goes with. I thought that 95% of them were trying to do it. They didn't give up, and that's a major success for me. Like Manuel, for example, I've never seen him write so much as I saw him write today. That was major.
We provided them with a reading on matter, and they had to actually identify and describe the characteristics of matter and provide details and evidence from the text in their response.
According to the text, solids are easy to recognize. Solid does have a definite shape, volume, and mass.
The Common Core standards are really grounded in literacy and in math. So they're grounded in the idea that without a foundation in math and without a foundation in literacy, and I mean literacy across content areas, we're not just talking about ELA, we're talking about science, we're talking about social studies, and we're talking about math, we're talking about the arts and humanities. Without a solid foundation in these two things, you're not going to be ready for the rest of your life. So that's why we need the Common Core.
And then the last video that you're going to see is actually the partnerships that we have in our schools. That is very important. In order for this work to be successful, and I think Meg touched upon it many times, it's costly. You need the resources. You need to make the connection with higher education, but you also need to make connections with corporations. One of the things that the General Electric Foundation has found, or GE has found, in Erie, Pennsylvania, they may have 100 jobs, but only 3 people that qualify for those particular engineering jobs. So we're looking for professionals that can meet these high level jobs that they have from the United States. So one of the things that we as educators need to do is also get in touch with the corporation and see what it is that they're developing. What type of skills do we need to develop in our students right now that go beyond the Common Core? Because, they're doing research and development for 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead. So these are the conversations, that's why these partnerships are important. In the last video, touches upon the partnerships that are crucial for schools to have. And it's not as much the monetary resources, it's more the professional development that we can get from these corporations. Money's always needed, of course, but I think also beyond teaching our teachers how to do the job that they're doing better to promote this critical thinking in the future of our students, and for them to work together collaboratively is key. And that's what we're learning from the business world. So the last video, Mark, is on the partnerships. And we found, since engaging in this Common Core work, our students are developing as researchers and learning to identify community-based problems and pose solutions. And we have a whole bunch of videos on that on YouTube as well that show different projects that our students are undertaking in our community in the northern tip of Manhattan, Washington Heights, Inwood, to make that their community, our community, better.
Each of you for coming to celebrate the 9th annual Urban Advanced Science Expo. This year we have over 600 students here presenting over 330 projects from 72 schools and over 90 science teachers.
We have been an Urban Advantage school for 6 years. This year, we took our students to the Museum of Natural History, the Hall of Science, and the Bronx Zoo to complete a scientific investigation on animal behavior. Students then presented their scientific investigations at the Urban Advantage Expo in the Museum of Natural History. It was great because the students had a chance to connect with the New York City school communities. Also, parents and friends from our school community showed up to support the presenters and to celebrate their student work in science. Students were also able to attend the 2013 NYC STEM Expo. They explored different STEM exhibits on a variety of topics, from the military, educational, environmental, and medical fields.
Compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is there a pulse? A little bit. Good. This is the heart.
At the expo, students were able to meet Chancellor Walcott. It was a great, enriching experience for our students.
TREES is designed as cutting-edge professional development that brings together interdisciplinary teams of faculty from the secondary level. I have to say that I have been so honored to work with the faculty from IS-52. They came as a very excited, deeply committed faculty who wanted to bring together literacy, math, science, technology, and engineering in a way that was meaningful not only for their students, but also for themselves. The final 20 hours of the Institute is the actual translation of what the faculty has learned as a cohort into core curriculum aligned with the Common Core standards. So it's a concerted effort to really bring research and pedagogy into their core curriculum. I'm looking forward to working more closely with IS-52 as we advance this notion of how higher education faculty and secondary education faculty can come together around what's needed in STEM education and how we can begin to think about the continuum of education from the middle school level up through college.
So we just to wrap it up quickly, these activities, this level of engagement, we try to promote on a daily basis in our school. And I say we try to promote because we don't know what the weather will be like one day to the next. But you see it in our school, and we're very proud of it. And since engaging in this work, we have noticed that our students are working together, sharing their ideas. They are learning how to defend their ideas through credible sources, and they're more independent and confident about sharing. And this is a population that some people might say, well, we could teach them the basic and let's move on, but this is the future of our community and our nation. So I think if we don't do this Common Core implementation correct, if we don't take the time, and we should take the other two pieces of it, teacher effectiveness, take a little time with that, and with standardized testing, take a little time. Let's teach our teachers how to implement this rigorous type of instruction. Let's take our time to do it right, because we're going to need our young people to be smarter in the future on how our resources are being used, because by the 2050, we may have triple the population we have today, or at least double. That's the projection, and we need our thinkers of that time to think how we're going to get and even now, how are we going to get the food supply, the water supply that we're going to need to survive our needs. So that's why the Common Core, I'm a true believer in it. I've seen it work in my particular school, and I just urge you not to hear all that noise saying that the Common Core doesn't work, that we should throw it away, that's not correct. In order for the survival of our country, I believe in a standardized curriculum that really maps it out from kindergarten through 12th grade is very needed. That way we could all keep on the same page. And quickly, as a closing note, as part of the General Electric Foundation, I also have the pleasure to go to learn and review the schools in Louisville, Kentucky. And I just did that this past November, and I did it the November before. So I've done it for 2 years in a row. And what I've seen is when they started implementing the shift 2 years ago, their instruction was not the depth of their instruction was not there. When we went back this year, you should see the depth, the knowledge that the children are doing, and they're doing the same thing that we are doing at Inwood 52. The same exact topics are being covered. So let's say one of my kids decides to move to Louisville, Jefferson County, he or she is not going to miss a beat. They're going to continue the work. That's why this work is really important, and thank you for listening to our story from 52.
So friends, we have a little bit of time, and I'm sure you have questions, and I want to get to them. I just wanted to mention that I mentioned this idea of pass-alongs, and so I had some pass-alongs from our principals. Interestingly enough, they touched on many of them. The teacher's primary pass-along to both of you was, will you support professional development? And it seemed that you both answered that, both in terms of what you can do with limited resource, in terms of working within the school, and what you can do in terms of partnership and bringing. So clearly it's important to both of you. Clearly you're dealing within the constraints that you have. That was one question. Another request from the teachers was for consistency. Well, guess what? That was exactly your theme. Now, I have a pass-along from the librarians, which was basically they were asking, what would you most want from them, and what do you think they do wrong? And that was interesting. It was a request for direction. So I'll ask you first, Meg, since you work closely with your librarian, and then Sal, since you would like to have a librarian. What would you want from your librarian, and what do you think of as a misstep on their part?
So one of the things we were really purposeful in is having an expectation. We started it with the humanities departments of the LA social studies that are combined. With our science fix, the librarian needed to help with one project a year. And so she actually does do a lot of work going into the classrooms and doing a lot of things around using the nonfiction text to really infuse into projects. And so it was a very arbitrary and mandated expectation initially, because that's the way we felt like we could only move it. There was not an organic relationship initially, I'll put it that way. But what we found was when the teachers started feeling that success of that extra support of Colette, our librarian, who's amazing, and started to see how students' projects changed because of the work that she brought into the classroom. We found that there was a much deeper desire among many faculty to start proactively planning with her and inviting her into the classrooms. So that sort of mandated expectation was 3 years ago. And at this point, in no way are we to 100% of all of these major projects Colette's involved in, but we do have a much more sort of organic relationship between Colette and the humanities and science teachers. I think our big challenge is we share the librarian with 2 high schools, so we're co-located. And unfortunately, the 2 high school principals don't necessarily see her as a resource in the same way. I'm sure my librarian friends out there could maybe relate to that around forcing her to do study halls as opposed to actual important instruction. The one thing I want to say is that I believe my librarian's a teacher, and so I think, and she has that sort of frame of mind as well, but maybe that's the one thing that librarians seeing themselves as part of the instructional faculty. I think it goes both ways. So I think we as school leaders need to see that. The librarians also need to embrace that sort of aspect as well, and name it within their school.
I had hoped Colette could be here. Unfortunately, she couldn't, but I asked her for her take on this from the librarian side. And she said one thing from her point of view was she recognized that the standards would be raised. So even as she was sharing independent reading options with students, she was giving them a book perhaps exactly where they were, but a couple of books that they might stretch towards. So even in giving someone an independent reading, it was the awareness that we as a school are all going towards more challenge, and can I offer you something that might be a stretch for you and thus participate in what we're all doing. And so, Sal, with your magic wand wish, what would you...
So the first thing I had to do was to remodernize the library. When I took over the school 8 years ago, it was not a place where you wanted students to go to do any type of research. It was not... we used to go there to do professional development. Children did use it, but it was old. It hadn't been remodernized for many years. So I had to go and secure some funds from the city council and RESO-A money. So I was able to recoup in 2 years' time $250,000. We renovated the whole library. We have all brand new furniture. We are still not accepting it because there's some glitches to the construction pieces that I want to get them repaired before I take them over. Once I take them over, they go and they don't fix them. Right. But once that is done, which is hopefully by this June, when we hire a librarian in the fall, and I say if because we're waiting for the other school, they may co-locate another high school in our building. So the principal that's coming in seems like she wants to collaborate and hire a librarian together because, it costs money. And if we do that, and even if we don't, we're still going to invest the money in our library because we would like the librarian to help us work with the classroom teachers, because the biggest thing now with the Common Core is finding these resources, informational sources for children to be able to use in order to defend their thesis, right, or their ideas. And that's a large time that's consumed by that. Teachers got to go on the website. So we would like a person to provide the opportunity for students to conduct collaborative research, creating activities that allow students to think critically about a particular topic and guiding them through the maze. Help them analyze the research if they can, and just facilitating the space, so audio visual pieces where the kids go. We weeded out a lot of books that were from they had yellow pages, and I'm not talking about the telephone books. We weeded them out and then slowly bringing books in that are more relevant and meaningful. As Mark said, we're getting some books a little below their level. We're getting books on level and above. And just having that collaboration with the classroom teachers.
So this is great. Now we have not too much time, but I'm sure you have some questions. Yes, please.
What work are you doing with your public libraries? So there is a partnership between New York City Public Libraries and the DOE, and so our teachers do have access to materials through the library system. We have no library anywhere near our school, actually. So beyond those sorts of macro partnerships, some field trips to a library for specific research projects, we're not, unfortunately, doing anything else at this point.
I have a recommendation. I'm actually going out to LA. I was just mentioning this to Melissa to speak to their conference of public librarians. Public libraries are a great interface with parents, and I think that Common Core, we didn't get to talk about this. The other part of this community is parents, and parents who may know little about the Common Core, may have fears, may have negatives, may be uncertain about how to support their kids in the Common Core. And I think for many parents, they may first go to a public library before a school library to learn what will help my children, what will be useful, what's different about this assessment. And also even on the younger level, and Obama's talking about this now, preschool education, helping to prepare kids for what's coming at an age-appropriate way. Again, the public library, which has story time and many kind of activities, is a central place for that. So I think certainly, aside from the partnership between public librarians and school librarians, so that the public librarians know what are the teachers going to be looking for, what are the kids going to come in and look for, there's also that parent outreach. In Kentucky, in Nashville, in Tennessee, they're doing something very interesting with public and school library collaboration in in resources, in funding, and in activities. But that's kind of a larger scale activity.
We have a library next to us, and our students use it basically to go and do their homework and research. I want to say 10% of our students go there. One of the things that we need to do better as a school is that we need to communicate with the parents, because our parents they want our students to go home right away. And one of the things is opening up that bridge that the kids are going to the library for a few hours to study after school because it's a nice place. And also, we do have a communication with the librarian next door. It's really next door to us, unlike your thing. They come and they administer the library cards and all that, and we have them help us weeding out the books. But that's all the communication we have. Like, we should be programming more educational programs for the parents and community there. And I'm wanting to take that advice back.
Okay, listen, I'm afraid time is short. I know you'll have more questions. Our principals do have to go back to their school buildings, but perhaps we can break one more question, then break, and if anyone has informal questions while you stretch or go for coffee. Is there another question we have for our principals before? Yes?
I was just curious, Dr. Adams, is your librarian on a fixed schedule or a flexible schedule? Do they actually teach any classes other than going directly into the classroom?
So I have a third of her time, and she does have a weekly schedule with specific teachers for my third of the time. The other two principals, unfortunately, utilize her for study hall.
But this is exactly the point of these events, to say, hey, don't use your library.
That's not right. It's like, right, that's not right. But yeah, I have her for a third of the time, so she runs our lunch program, and then she runs, like, where kids come in to do different library things during lunch. She has a club, and then she does all the 7th grade humanities one period a week, and then she does these sorts of larger projects with the rest of my classroom teachers.
Again, well, thank you very much to Meg and to Sal and